Woolly Man. Ever since the release of Shaun the Sheep movie back in 2015, fans have been eagerly awaiting for the comeback of Aardman Animations on the big screen. And with their next feature, the anticipation reached new heights. Not only did they promise to deliver an original animated feature, but it would also mark the directorial return of the legendary creator of Wallace and Gromit and Chicken Run, Nick Park. And once the movie finally made its debut to the public, those grand expectations were kinda met. Not entirely, but it didn't come out as a bad film. It is a pleasant feature with great stop-motion animation, enjoyable humor, and does include Aardman's signature charm to have audiences leave with a smile, but honestly, this would be among one of the company's weakest works. The reason why this film can also feel like a bit of a letdown is because the story is pretty lazy and can often feel rushed. I mean, one would expect a lot from an Aardman movie by Nick Park about cavemen versus gladiators, but it actually turns out to be the generic sports movie about the outcasts versus the pros fighting it out in a game of football, or soccer for you Americans. It does feel a bit disappointing that it didn't live up to the massive expectations, but at the very least, it is still a charming feature for both sports fans and Aardman fans.
Wow, that's the best thing since, well, ever!
The Secret Life of Pets. Sure, the story completely rips off Toy Story, but at least the characters are lovable and funny. Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted. I'll admit that I'm actually a fan of the Madagascar movies. I think they're both funny and decent as an animated film. But with that said, Europe's Most Wanted has to be the worst of the three. Not only are the same flaws from the second film are apparent, like the antagonist is just another ripoff of a Disney villain, which in this case is Cruella de Vil, but we don't get any character development from the recurring characters. We don't learn anything new from Alex, Marty, Gloria, or Melman. They're just there because this is a Madagascar film. And the humor is just not funny anymore, which is probably the most disappointing thing about this movie. The movie is a total dud, right? Not really, no. The saving grace of the film would have to be the circus animals in every way. They gave the movie an actual plot instead of the trying to go back to New York scenario. They gave us some really nice moments with the animation, especially with that scene that would play Katy Perry's Firework. It's probably the best animation in the franchise. And they bring us a lot of new interesting characters like Stefano and Vitali. It may not be the best Madagascar film, but it still gave us a good show. And if there's one thing that we'll always remember from this film, everybody now?
Circus, Afro, circus, Afro, polka dot, Afro.
Minions. Considering how these little guys became a pop culture icon thanks to the great success of the Despicable Me films, it's no surprise to see that the Minions would end up with their own feature. Unfortunately though, their adventures aren't as strong as when they were with Gru. The Minions' adventures in late 60s London ended up delivering a generically weak and predictable plot, and the temporary villains that they found, Scarlet Overkill and her husband Herb, are unnecessarily over the top. I get that they want to be comedic villains, but in a movie called Minions, I'm sure there's already enough humor as it is. But just because it landed on the worst pile, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad movie. As it is, Minions is actually quite an enjoyable film. The humor is great, the Minions themselves are likable, the animation is fun, and the history of the characters give them a new interesting depth. There have been better films this year, sure, but this one still manages to do well on its own. But either if it's in the best or worst list, Minions will still remain as one of the biggest animated features of all time. No, seriously, have you seen how much it made at the box office? It became the first ever non-Disney animated film to surpass $1 billion. These guys can literally just fart out money whenever they want.
Guys, cut it out. This is really unprofessional.
The Lego Movie 2, the second part. After going through a couple of toys that tried and failed to emulate the Lego Movie's success with their features, the Lego Movie itself returned earlier in the year to show people how it's done. Did it prevail to make another great and admirable hit in the leagues of the first? Well, no. But at least it still does stand well on its own. Sure, the story and some of the writing received a downgrade due to the difficult task of continuing the plot after revealing the great twist from the first, but it still has the spirit of what audiences love about the original. It still has a good dose of decent humor, the heart is as strong as before about what Legos mean to people, and of course, the amazing animation that brings these Legos to life in an unbelievably creative way. Now that the LEGO Movie has become a fully established franchise with plenty to compare, this sequel would be placed somewhere in the middle, which does reflect well on how the movie itself is. It doesn't necessarily have that element of surprise or that high level of cleverness as the original or LEGO Batman, but still manages to perform better and feel more like a legit LEGO movie than LEGO Ninjago. Basically, not the best LEGO movie, but could have been a lot worse, and on its own, it still does provide some solid and well-crafted entertainment. Is it the best animated movie or the best LEGO movie? Not really, but at least it can have the title of the best animated film based on a toy line of the year.
See, that wasn't so bad, nothing got in.
Teen Titans Go to the Movies. While the show is known to be one of the most successful series on Cartoon Network, it is also known for getting a lot of hate from the cartoon community. So much so that it ended up getting out of control and now the haters look even worse than the show itself. However, when the Titans made their big screen debut, it turned out to be the biggest surprise of the year as not just an enjoyable animated film praised by critics, but also a pretty good DC film. As for the haters, well, I don't know. They're probably complaining about other animated reboots for some pathetically stupid reason. But back onto the movie, what makes this an unexpected delight is the clever way it builds itself as a satire. Not just to the modern DC films, but also towards the entire superhero genre, giving itself a lot more material to work with in order to display what makes those movies amazingly great and sometimes laughably dumb. Sure, the story itself is a little unoriginal, and it visually shows that it has a rather small budget, but it also shows that there was a lot of effort put into it. It is noticeable how the team of artists and filmmakers worked the best they can with the tools they had and managed to bring out some good humor, likable characters, creative animation, and witty writing. While DC may not know how to make their films dark and gritty, Teen Titans Go would come in and make a movie as fun as an upbeat, inspirational song about life.
I am a real hero. I even have my own superhero team.
The Box Trolls. This is a bit of a new path for Laika, since their last films tried to be more light horror, and here, they're going with a fantasy adventure angle. And the result is actually pretty good. The animation shows us how the company has mastered the art of stop motion, and some of the characters like the Box Trolls themselves or Archibald Snatcher are highly memorable and really bring this movie to life. Although, admittedly, this wasn't Laika's best work, and the problems can be found in the writing. The story is basically a copy of Tarzan, and the main characters like Eggs and Winnie are just not interesting. But even with those flaws, Laika did think out of the box to deliver us something special. Now, if I would have expanded this list into a top 6 best and worst films, then Mr. Peabody and Sherman would be at the number 6 worst spot, and the Box Trolls at number 6 best. But it's better off if I keep this as a top 5 list because, well, let's be honest, a top 6 list sounds kind of weird and not a well-rounded number as much as 5. But anyways, these two films may not be the best or the worst, but they are still worth checking out. The Croods. This is from the same mind that brought us Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon, and with how this ended up becoming, it really shows. The Croods might be the most surprising animated feature this year just by how fun and heartfelt it is to watch. What I never expected to find is that the characters are very likable and well developed, whether it be Eep, Grug, or even Guy, where the people can easily find themselves rooting for them on their journey. Not to mention that the animation is just beautiful. From the large environments that gives us amazing views, to the creative design of the animals, to the eccentric animation on the characters. It's a fine example of what Chris Sanders and his team is capable of. But with that said, there are a few things where Chris has to definitely work on. Like his writing. In here, it's just terrible. The story is unoriginally predictable, utilizing the most overused plot elements, while the characters themselves feel like they're copies of other works. Plus the fact that the jokes do feel more juvenile, feeling like the movie is geared more for kids than anyone else. The Croods may be a bit unoriginal, but it's what it did on its own that's worth remembering.
Sausage Party, easily the nastiest and funniest movie of the year where the clever writing really makes up for the cheap animation.
Epic. This could possibly be one of the most underrated films of 2013. Epic can be best described as the spiritual successor to DreamWorks' Rise of the Guardians. Not just because of William Joyce's involvement, but also because it gives out the same feeling of wonder. I think it goes without saying that this could be the best animation made by Blue Sky yet. It introduces us to this whole new world deep within the forest that has tons of magic, beautifully looking characters, very nice details, and gives our world a completely different point of view that literally makes the ordinary look extraordinary. But as much as I applaud them on the animation, I can see why this has fallen a bit into obscurity. Since it is mostly set in the forest, Epic seems to blend in with all the other environmental films like Fern Gully or Avatar, to the point where even the story is kind of similar. That, and some of the characters aren't that appealing to begin with. There are some that are great like Ronan, Mandrake, and Mub and Grub, but the main characters like MK and Nod aren't really likable, and some like Queen Terra and Bufo are just there to get the celebrity's name on their ads. It could have done more to stand out from the others, but then again, it's better to have something epic than another Ice Age sequel.